much. I am really happy to be here sharing the experience from Colombia in terms of planning and investing in order to get development objectives. I want to say thank you to the World Bank for this invitation. I would say first something. There is an index in the, you can get it in the internet, in Google, that is called the Failed State Index. The Failed State Index. And you know that in the year 2004, 2005, Colombia was in that index in the position number, if I'm not wrong, 12 or 13. Colombia was considered at that time, and it was not the worst year that we had. We had years that were even worse than 2004 or 5. Colombia was considered a failed state. But it happens that Colombia did very different reforms that were really successful. And the last time I saw this figure of the failed state index, Colombia was like in position 40 or 45 or something like that. I mean, it was not considered again a failed state. I'm going to show you something related also that can explain a little bit about what happened at that time with Colombia. The reforms that we had to implement, part of that was, and a key issue was the role of government. The role of government. And a very important reason for the lack of control of territory was the lack of government in different parts of the country. Colombia is a large country. It's more than 1 million square kilometers. More than 40 million people live there. And before the 90s, I would say even in the 90s, the size of the state in Colombia was too small to have effective control on the territory. And that was part of the problem. And I will show you something about that. But then, after we improve our macroeconomics, etc., and several issues, we had several challenges. Let me show you. We have several challenges that are not different than the challenges of many Latin American and Caribbean countries. The challenge of sustained growth, how to improve growth in order to at least a condition. It's not enough to grow, of course, but if you don't have growth, you cannot solve problems like poverty, etc., etc. So the first thing is how to get sustained growth, and to put it in a specific figure, how to grow higher or larger than 5% or around 6% per year for a period long enough to really have conditions to solve many social problems. For example, Chile grew 6.4%, 6.5% for 15 years. For 15 years. And in those 15 years, poverty rates in Chile went from around 38% to 12 or 13%. So it's not enough, as I said before, but you need to get sustained growth. That's a key issue. Because if you, as I said before, if you don't have that possibility, you are going to be in serious problems. Second, social inclusion. You know that Latin America and the Caribbean, Colombia particularly, we had a very unequal situation, social situation of many, with many people very poor and some others very few, very rich, and there are very different opportunities for everyone. So the second challenge I would say is social inclusion. The third, that probably is not, I don't know how relevant it could be in Jamaica, but in Colombia is the case, is regional inclusion, in the sense that there are regional inequalities that are very, very large. For example, just to put an example, Bogota has the GDP, the per capita GDP of Bogota is the same as Uruguay, but the per capita GDP of the poorest county of Colombia is the same as Bolivia. So we have very large differences inside the country, and we need to handle those differences. And of course, peace consolidation. Peace has been a constant challenge and really something that has harmed the country really bad. Some studies say that Colombia could have grown 1 or 2 percentage points more if we hadn't faced this situation of violence, guerrillas, and illegal armed groups, very much related with drug trafficking, of course. So those were the challenges. Those were the challenges in 2002, in 2006, in 2010, when different President Uribe first and then President Juan Manuel Santos came to power. One idea, and I want to, that's one first message that I want to say to you, is Colombia had a tool that is called the National Development Plan, and had an institution in charge of that, which is the Ministry of Planning. Many Latin American countries in the 90s eliminated those institutions. The ministries of planning disappeared in different countries in Latin America. Colombia didn't do that, and I think it was good not to have disappeared the Ministry of Planning and these tools, these instruments for economic and social planning. So what we did was to do this route map. I would say the National Development Plan is a route map. It's a route map in which you can have the different objectives that are related with each of the challenges that I referred before, like for example, to get growth and higher growth and competitiveness, to get social inclusion, that we call there in the National Development Plan the equality of opportunities and the consolidation of peace. Those are the 3 key issues, and of course, with respect to each of these objectives, there are some variables that are relevant to measure the success or not, the degrees of success of the policies implemented in the context of the National Development Plan. What are those variables? To get more jobs, to get more security, to get less poverty. And we put numbers there, I'm going to show you, and that is an important process to identify who are your priorities and to put numbers on your priorities, to say, listen, I want to get an increase in employments in this amount, I want to decrease poverty in this amount, we want to increase the growth rate in this amount, etc., etc. So I want to focus a little bit more on this part of growth and competitiveness, because it's quite related with productivity, with the challenge of productivity that our countries had. Behind the National Development Plan, there were specific strategies. So the first thing is you need strategies that support each of the objectives. And so, for example, to get growth, higher growth and competitiveness, there was a strategy for innovation, there was a strategy for improving competitiveness, and there were the identification of some key engines of growth, key sectors that we call engines of growth for growth and employment generation. So that is another important part, is to identify who are those, what are those growths. And in the case of the current, the President Juan Manuel Santos, in this presidency, those engines of growth were the agricultural sector, housing, infrastructure. I'm referring specifically to transport infrastructure, mining, and some sectors based on innovation. And you can see there, I just to put some examples here, that every sector has a specific objective, a specific target. There are indicators. For example, housing means to build 1 million new housing units. Infrastructure means to get 2,000 kilometers of two-lane roads, etc., etc., which is as I said before, an important part of your strategy. You have to define your strategy, you have to prioritize your objectives, you have to identify key sectors, and you have to put some numbers about what do you want to get. So those are the numbers. The numbers are, for example, to generate 2.5 million new jobs, to formalize 500,000 informal jobs, a key problem that Colombia and Latin America and the Caribbean in general had at the high levels of informality, and to reduce unemployment from 2 to a level of 9% more or less, and young unemployment, one of the worst that we had, unemployment for young people, to something lower than 18%. Those were the numbers for jobs. Those were for jobs, and those are the numbers for poverty. To get a poverty reduction from 42.3% to 35.5%, to reduce extreme poverty to 9.5%, to reduce multidimensional poverty, that's a different definition of poverty, to 22%. And there are a specific program focused on families in extreme poverty that have a special treatment, so to speak. So we want to graduate from extreme poverty 350,000 families of that strategy. So, and with respect to growth, we wanted to get an average annual growth of 6%. Just a little analysis about that. Colombia, in the last 20 years of the last century, grew around 3%, no more than 3%, while in the 60s or 70s was growing like 6% or 7%. So growing was decreasing every decade, and this decade, in the first decade of this century, the growth was again like a 4.5%. So 6% is something that is quite unusual for us. 4.5% is now usual. It was not usual 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Now it could be, but 6% is not usual. So to grow 6% is a challenge. It's something that you cannot get easily. So what we did was an exercise that I just wanted to show the general message here, is that once you have your national development plan, once you have your figures, once you have the identification of your sectors that are going to be your priorities, you put the numbers in an economic model, and we are able to say what are going to be the contributions of each of the sectors to get the targets in growth, in poverty, in unemployment. For example, as I said before, I am going to start from here. This is the GDP growth in Colombia. Like you could say, if the external conditions are not bad, is the external condition, the international economics is behaving well, I would say, we will be able to get 4.5% of growth. But with the engine of growth of mining, our calculations were that we were able to increase that level in 0.3. 0.3. Of course, behind mining, there are a target of investment, part public, part private, that are able to produce that result. with respect to housing, to build 1 million housing for families would push economic growth in 0.4, and agricultural will be able to improve it in another 0.1, and infrastructure in another 0.3. At the end, as you can see, with the impact of those engines of growth, we were able to increase from 4.5% to a little bit more larger than 5.5%. That's the contribution of those, that are the expecting contribution of those engines of growth. The last part, of course, and is perhaps the main objective of this week, of this seminar, of this analysis that you have been doing this week, is the productivity, how to increase productivity. That's a challenge of the productivity shock that we need in order to get to the 6% or larger than that. And of course, you have to figure out where you can get that 6%. And there are some issues that are related with policies that Colombia implemented recently, more or less recently, to get that behavior of productivity. Part of that is tariff reform to decrease tariffs. Part of that is the free trade agreement with the US and the European Union. Part of that is some measures, some policies to promote foreign direct investment. The idea was that part, those policies, were able to improve productivity in the country. I would say here that those were like at the plans, or those were like at the numbers that we calculate, we estimate with different exercises. Of course, the question is, well, what happened with reality? Reality is that in the last 2 years, 2011, 2012, Colombia grew not 6%, not even 5% or 5.5%, but 4.5%. So it's like you got to the situation in which you were here, 4.5%. So what happened with the engines of growth? They didn't do anything. What was the effect of there? What was the effect of them? This is like there is an expression in airplane. I am not sure what is the meaning in English, but it's when you have an airplane and it's with the speed, in Spanish is crucero, velocidad de crucero. It's like a speed at which you don't have to accelerate. Exactly. What is the cruising? Altitude, exactly. So that's the speed, 4.5. It seems that we did nothing with the engines of growth that we. But there is something that is interesting. Behind those numbers of those engines of growth, of mining, of housing, of public works, infrastructure, etc., behind those numbers are big, large numbers of investment. The real money there, put from the public sector and the private sector. So yeah, one explanation could be completely failure. We waste that money. We didn't do anything. We didn't get. But there is another more optimistic explanation that I agree more, in fact. That is, somehow the external world changed. Well, it was worse than we think it was going to be. And I am talking about the growth of China, the impact that China had on the prices of our commodities, our raw materials, etc., etc. Some issues that affect us very much. So my explanation is, in fact, that without those engines of growth, Colombia would have grown less than 4.5%, perhaps 3.5% or 3.2% or something like that. So at the end, it's just to say, of course, you don't have the control of every part of it. Part of the process, part of the things are out of your hands, out of your control. and depends on many other things, depends on the Federal Reserve, depends on what these guys in the European Union do or not do, etc. But that's an important thing to take into account. Now, with respect to unemployment, the idea was that without any additional effort, we will be able to get an unemployment rate of 10.5%. But the idea was, of course, to decrease it below 9%. And here you have our calculations of what will be the effect of each engine of growth on unemployment. Where is unemployment currently? These 6 months, the last 6 months have been around 9.6%, which means we are quite close to the target that we have to get at least something below 9%. And with respect to poverty, in fact, because of different reasons, we started in 37.1. We should be able, that was the plan, to get to 36%, and in fact, we are currently in 32%. I mean, poverty has been decreased faster than we had expected. And the last part is extreme poverty. That is interesting because we realize that once you have all engines of growth working, you could reduce poverty, extreme poverty, from 11.6% to around 10.5%, but you have, that engines of growth were not enough to decrease extreme poverty as you want. And that's why it says there, I don't know if you can read in the words that are in the diagonal, it says you need specific programs, focalize on those families in order to reduce. You need an extra effort. You need something else that is not going to come from your growth impact, that has to come from your social programs in order to get those results. Growth is not enough to reduce extreme poverty, even under the best circumstances, to the levels that I described before. Okay, so that was I'm not going to refer to this. That was the first part, but I want to just to emphasize perhaps 2 or 3 things. First, the importance of having a roadmap, the importance of having a roadmap with specific objectives in which there are few and key priorities that need to be say put in the main objectives of public policies. That's a key issue. Second, of course, the importance of having instruments, technical instruments, to show how to identify these engines of growth and what are the impact of those engines of growth over your objectives. What are the contributions to those engines of growth over the targets that you have? Behind those engines of growth, what are the key word I would say is investment. Investment. If you have no public and private investment, you are not able to get those numbers. You are not able to promote that and to produce that growth. And that's very important. That's very important. And in the second part, the other part that I want to show you, I'm going to refer to the challenge from the point of view of the government to make a more effective public investment. A more effective policy investment. How to improve efficiency, how to improve impact of public investment, how to improve the ability of public investment to attract private capital, to attract private investment, etc. But And here is when I want to show you, this is the size of the Colombian state since the beginning of the 19th century. This is something, I mean, the measure here is like the total public expenditure as a percentage of GDP, And you can see here that from the most part of the century, Colombia had a really small state. When you compare it to, no, I'm not talking about Sweden or Finland or Denmark. I'm talking about even this Latin America. In terms of Latin America, the size of the Colombian state was really small. Until, and you can see there is a huge increase at the end of the century. It was specifically after 1991, excuse me. In 1991, there was a new constitution that said at that moment, we need a state more capable of controlling the territory. We need a state more prepared to reduce poverty. We need a state more prepared to generate inclusive growth, social inclusiveness, etc., etc. So in the short period of 8 years between 1991 and 1998, the size of the Colombian government doubled. The size of the state doubled from more or less 12% to 22%, which was, I mean, you can imagine, it's not easier for a country, for a large country, to double the size of a state. Why was it double? And that's also an important message from here. Was not because of chaos, or was not because of, was an intentional purpose to get, because as I said before, it was perceived that we had at that time a very small state. And in fact, if you ask me, I think that the Colombian Constitution of 1991 was right. The Colombian state, the size of the Colombian state at that moment was not enough to ensure the rights of citizens, to promote social inclusiveness, to promote growth, etc., etc. In fact, the Colombian economy has been like at the most stable, and until 1998 was the most stable economy in Latin America and the Caribbean. It was always not the fiscal deficit, no fiscal problems, nothing at all, not macroeconomic volatility, very few macroeconomic volatility. I mean, we were like the best students of the class in terms of macroeconomic stability. But we were being the worst students in the class in terms of political stability, and in terms of violence, in terms of control of the territory. And it took the state or the society a decision to change things in that way, in order to get a country to be feasible in terms of development, in terms of objectives, in terms of at some moment try to achieve to become a developed country, etc., etc. So that's the story. That's the easy part of the story, if you want. The difficult part of the story is that at that time, when you see those red bars going up, if I put here, I have it in Colombia, but not here. If I put here the bars of the income, the taxes didn't increase as faster as the expenditures. And of course, the implication was that we were like financing higher expenses with debt. We get high indebtedness, and at that point we went into the worst fiscal crisis that we had in 100 years. The worst fiscal crisis in 100 years. And at that time, we received the IMF, we received the World Bank, every multilateral bank was there, seated with us, doing conditionality programs, solving all these issues that are, for sure, are really, that are an impediment if you don't solve it, since you don't solve them, an impediment to development and social inclusiveness, etc., etc. So it took for us time to solve this, to stabilize the macroeconomics of the country, and then to go ahead. But once we did that, and it was more or less in 2002, 2003, that we had inflation under control, that we decreased the debts, but I have to be very, that's an interesting part of the story. That was done without really decreasing the size of the state. The size of the state didn't decrease with the fiscal adjustment. What happened was that we increased the size of the taxes. We increased the size of the taxes, and we also increased economic growth. And perhaps the most important factor that started to produce growth was to improve the situation of security. We had in 2002 3,000 or 3,500 kidnappings per year. Currently is around 120 or 125. In 2010 it was 200, 220. So the possibility, and I have been able, and I had the opportunity to go to many places in the country, and the same expression that you get from people is like 10 years ago, you were unable to move from your town. You were unable to travel to any place because you were going to be in danger. That was 10 years ago. But the good thing was that at least an important part of that expenditure, of that higher expenditure that we had there, was invested in security, was invested in improving security. And that improvement in security produced economic growth. And given that, you didn't need and probably you were unable to decrease the size of the state at that moment. In fact, in the current situation, I think that Colombia needs another at least 1.5 or 2 percentage points additional in taxes in order to be able to cover the expenditures that are going to be associated with the peace process that is actually under progress, and some other issues like to improve still the quality of infrastructure, etc., etc., etc. But that's just to tell you how public investment, the absence of public investment can be a disaster, as it was a disaster when you have no public investment in several parts of the territory, and instead of that, you had presence of drug dealers and trafficking dealers and drug traffic in those parts of the country. The absence of public investment was one of the issues that explained the proliferation of illegal groups. That's one part. The other part is well-oriented, well-designed public investment, in this case toward improving, as I said before, security, can get really social benefits in terms of growth and in terms of economic dynamic. Now, the last part is that, of course, to increase the size of the state in that in that way implies an incredible challenge on how to spend well, how to do a good investment. Because of course you can't be wasting millions of pesos, millions of dollars, if you don't do that in that way. So part of the agenda after you stabilize the economy, after and at the same time that you were trying to control the security, was how to improve the state, how to improve the efficiency of the state. And there are some reforms that I want just to mention to you that were very important for us to improve the quality of the public investment. One, for example, has to be with public procurement. There is, for example, the bids to assign public works projects, etc., have to go to a website, which is the site in which there are the different projects, and there is transparency about how are the processes, what are the suppliers, etc., etc. So that is one measure that was important. The other was the introduction of auctions in the bid process. That was also important. That has implied an important decrease of costs and an important amount of savings in public expenditures, etc. That has been one. The other was public employment, how to improve public employment. And one of the key issues is, and it's a challenge, of course, is always a challenge, is how to introduce meritocracy in the public employment career. And we did after around the design of an administrative career path in which there are meritocracy is the key word to get these public jobs for people. The other is something that it could be like how to reduce, perhaps the translation there is not good. It's how to reduce the red tape that is so cumbersome, that is so complex, and that implies a lot of different costs for the country. Just one figure. There is this index of the World Bank called Doing Business, the Doing Business Index. And in the Doing Business Index in 2008, Colombia was in place 83, more or less between 100, if I'm not wrong, 120 or 115 countries, in place 83. 3 years after that, Colombia went from place 83 to place 37. And that was just improving a lot of things that has to, and it's important. When I think how that happened, it was an explicit objective of the policy. There was a manager that was put there by the president with the exclusive objective of reducing red tape procedures. For example, doing easier to register, to do the registration of a property, or to take a build permit, etc., etc. Key factors, specific issues, and that's very important because when you compare international surveys, for example, the World Economic Forum is full of perception. There are many perceptions. There are a lot of perceptions in the world, around the world, about Colombia, that Colombia is a dangerous place, and you can improve, but the perception still is there. Perceptions change very slowly, very slowly. You can change your situation, your real situation, but perceptions are there like a sticky issue that is very difficult to avoid, unfortunately. But this thing of doing business are objective measures, are specific policies, are not just perception. So that's important. In fact, there are some indicators here about Jamaica. It was interesting. I was comparing Jamaica with Colombia, and there are many problems that are quite similar. In fact, there said their institutions, Jamaica appears better than Colombia in institutions. But Colombia is much better in macroeconomic issues than Jamaica. That's in the part in which the difference is larger toward Colombia is in terms of macroeconomic stability. That's the one. The others are quite comparable, in fact. But then, as I said to you, that was one of the excuse me. That was one of the yeah. Sorry that. Okay. So that was the other reform that was very important, the anti-red tie policy, to say it in that way. Okay. Another policy was, that was something that was incredible. You know that there were 5,600 assets, like buildings, houses, properties, that were in hands of governments, of the national government or in the hands of local governments. Those governments don't even know that they have those buildings or that they have those houses or they have those offices, etc. So they were like assets that were buried underground. There was no management about those assets. There was no use of those assets, etc., etc. So the idea was how to clean the house, how to put this in order, how to take these 5,681 assets and organize them in an office that was in charge of managing them and doing and producing a very good effect on that. After another important reform was electronic government, of course, how to have the mayors, the different municipalities in line, say hospitals, public libraries, etc., etc. And finally, I would like to refer to something that is very important. And this is very important because it's the possibility of measuring what you want to improve. If you don't measure what you are doing, is absolutely impossible to improve, because you don't know where you are. You don't know if you are improving or are worsening things, etc., etc. So, and this is only, I'm going to show the next one is just this, is you start with the National Development Plan. The National Development Plan has its own system of monitoring and evaluating that is called Synergia. Is there, trying to measure how are the objectives of getting more jobs, of getting less poverty, of getting higher growth, etc., of getting more municipalities connected through internet, etc., etc. Synergia does that job. Just measure each of one of the targets of the National Development Plan. Now, you implement the National Development Plan through policies that are approved by the President and the ministries, and those are that they call the COMPES. COMPES is the policy documents that are approved, as I said before, by the ministries and the President. Then there is a system to monitoring the application of those policies that is called SysCompes. SysCompes is a system of information to see if the decisions has been approved, has been implemented, or what happened with them. Then you have the investment projects, and the investment project has its own information system in order to get the indication of how are they evolving, And the public assessment, the public policy assessment is how to evaluate public policies. If I use conditional cash transfer to improve school attendance, does it work? Is working? I need evaluations for those policies in order to escalate or to change the policy or to eliminate the policy or to do something. But I need evidence about that. And I think that I don't have more time to just to show you that there are several levels that you need information from. The transversal level, the regional level, the sectoral level, the level of information about entity and about projects specifically. Colombia has really improved those processes, and I think that there has been a good job up to now. The last time is something that is under progress, and is the basic idea is this. The project, an investment project, is always the result of two forces, political forces and technical forces or issues, if you want. Political forces, that are related with interest groups, etc., whatever you want, are of course part of a decision process in a democracy. It's absolutely impossible to avoid political factors that affect the decisions in terms of investment. It's not possible. We are political societies. We live in democracies, and that's part of life. It's just part of life. But the thing is that you can have also the possibility of having technical processes to get or to achieve or to do some indications about the technical ability of a project to generate growth, the technical ability of a project to generate social inclusion, the technical ability of a project to generate or to the impact on regional inclusion, etc. So if we improve develop methodologies to measure productivity of investment and efficiency of investments, we are able to balance much more the political factors with technical factors. We don't want to eliminate the political factors. We want to equilibrate in a better way, and not to be in the situation in which only the political factors are determining the decisions, the investment decisions. We want to put the technical elements that are able to do that. Colombia also has been working on that, but has still a lot of path ahead to improve it in that way. So I just wanted to share some of these ideas that I hope can be interesting for the process in which Jamaica is currently involved, trying to get the economy ahead, trying to improve the quality of the public expenditures and the public investment, and of course with the final objective, which is the objective of all of us, that is to get a better situation, a higher welfare for the population. Thank you very much.
And the things that you put in place in terms of infrastructure, mining, and so forth. And then you talk about your target in terms of productivity and so forth. To get to your 6.5% or 6%, and in that list you put out with your target for mining and so forth, I see nothing on education and training. Is it that you're all right in that respect?
An excellent question, and I have to say that I am going to just to answer in this sense. Now we realize that perhaps the first engine of growth should be education. I mean, if you don't have education moving at the same time, you are going to have really serious constraints to growth. So definitely, I mean, elections, presidential elections are going to be next year, and I'm completely sure that education is going to be the issue, together with the peace process for sure. So I would say that.